Oh, Justin Trudeau. A lot of Canadians had high hopes for you. I know I didn't, which is why I didn't vote for you. But a lot of people did, and most of them are just now beginning to realize exactly what kind of man they voted for. Trudeau's gotten a lot of online international attention recently due to Motion 103, which I'll discuss a little bit later. But as a Canadian myself, I think it's important to talk about a lot of the other things, the domestic stuff that might not make it into the news in the US or UK. And yes, I do think it's important for people in the US or the UK to know what's going on in Canada. I know we're just Canada, guys, but we're still a large world economy, a middle power militarily, and most importantly, Justin Trudeau is a canary in the coal mine for the rest of you, regarding what happens when a hard left candidate not only takes office, but with a decisive majority in a modern first world country. For those of you not in the know, Justin Trudeau is sort of like our Obama, minus the opposition obstructionism, as well as Obama's public speaking ability.
You'll be running against Stephen Harper in the next election.
I think so. You know what? I'll let the Conservatives figure that one out.
Their campaigns were run remarkably similar, in that they both emphasized their candidates' youth as a way to show that they were more connected and knowledgeable about the problems a modern nation faces. They also both abandoned that rhetoric after taking office, instead opting to pursue corporate left interests. But to really get into the trouble with Justin Trudeau, we have to go back. Way back. All the way back to Justin's father, the 15th Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau. A quick note here before we begin. I'm about to provide a lot of Canadian political history, as I suspect most viewers of this video won't be Canadian and won't know about the political climate that allowed Justin Trudeau to become Prime Minister. I think it's important to describe the way the stage was set before Trudeau's arrival, but if you're just not interested in that, you can jump ahead to the time shown here, where I'll get into the meat of Justin Trudeau's actions. I warn you though, without the proper context, they may not make as much sense. Pierre Trudeau was one of Canada's most popular and longest-serving prime ministers in history. The large amount of public infatuation with him was nicknamed Trudeau-mania by the media at the time, a label that very briefly came back into public use to describe Justin during his own campaign. Trudeau spent his youth as what we would call today a proto-SJW, interested in topics such as Marxism and feminism. And even though Trudeau would not be a radical Marxist or feminist during his political career, it is safe to say that those ideas helped inform his moderate liberalism. As Justice Minister, he legalized homosexuality and created more flexible divorce laws. And as Prime Minister, he helped bring Canada into the G7 as a world economic power, he passed the Access to Information Act, the Canada Health Act, brought the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms into force, modernized Canada's constitution, and used the government to help secure Canadian economic resources and infrastructure through projects like the Via Rail, Petro-Canada, and the NEP. All the while giving Bruce Bolton a run for his money in the evil looks department. Basically, Pierre Trudeau was just like what you'd expect out of a liberal whose formative years were entirely post-World War II. He was a hippie who used the power of the government to expand civil rights for citizens. And he also used that power to either regulate or directly compete with private companies in a number of civil service industries. But his past within Marxism hadn't made him a bleeding heart either. When the FLQ, a Marxist terrorist group operating in Quebec, began to kidnap government officials, Pierre used the War Measures Act to temporarily suspend civil liberties in order to break the group, with public support.
Doesn't it worry you, having a town, that you've got to resort to this kind of thing?
No, it doesn't worry me. I think it's natural that if people are being abducted, that they be protected against such abduction. What would you do if a Quebec minister, another Quebec minister were abducted, or a federal minister?
Well, but isn't that one of the...
Is your position that you should give in to the 7 demands of the FLQ and...
Not at all. My position is completely the opposite.
What is your position?
My position is that you don't give in to any of them.
All right. But you don't protect yourselves against the possibility of blackmail.
You seem to be thinking this in your statement in the House this morning. You seem to be saying that you thought the press had been less than responsible in its coverage of the story so far. Could you elaborate on that?
Not less than responsible. I was suggesting that I should perhaps use a bit more restraint, which you're not doing now. You're going to make a big news item of this, I'm sure.
Well, with great respect, it is a big news item.
Yeah, but the main thing that the FLQ is trying to gain from this is a hell of a lot of publicity for the movement.
Recognition.
And I'm suggesting that the more recognition you give to them, the greater their victory is, and I'm not interested in giving them a victory. But
would you, would you surely agree with the proposition that perhaps it is would be wise to use less inflammatory terms than bandits when you talk of a bunch of people who have the lives of 2 men in their hands?
You don't think they're bandits?
I explain it badly, I think, but what you're talking about, to to me is choices.
Yeah.
And my choice is to live in a society that is free and democratic, which means that you don't have people with guns running around in it.
All right, then
And one of the things I have to give up for that choice is the fact that people like you may be kidnapped.
Sure.
Sir, if you had to right now...
But this isn't my choice, obviously. You know, I think it's more important to get rid of those who are committing violence against the total society and those who are trying to run the government through a parallel power by establishing their authority by kidnapping and blackmail. And I think it's our duty as a government to protect government officials and important people in our society against being used as tools in this blackmail. No, you don't agree to this, but I'm sure that, once again, with hindsight, you would have probably found it preferable if Mr. Cross and Mr. Laporte had been protected from kidnapping, which they weren't, because the steps we're taking now weren't taken. But even with your hindsight, I don't see how you can deny that.
No, I still go back to the choices you have to make in the kind of society that you live in.
There's a lot of bleeding hearts around who just don't like to see people with helmets and guns. All I can say is go on and bleed, but it's more important to keep law and order in this society than to be worried about weak-kneed people who don't like the looks of a soldier.
At any cost? At any cost? How far would you go with that? How far would you extend that?
Well, just watch me.
And then there is, of course, the joke that Pierre Trudeau didn't actually father Justin, but Fidel Castro did, considering Margaret Trudeau's cozy relationship with the Cuban dictator, as well as how much Fidel and Justin look alike as adults. It's probably not true, but hey, memers got a meme. In the end, there is good reason for Pierre Trudeau to be considered one of Canada's most popular prime ministers. He did a lot to modernize Canada, secure civil rights, and bring in social programs that Canadians today are both proud of and use regularly, all the while having a political backbone that was unusual at the time. Justin, well, doesn't really follow in his father's footsteps. Let's look at the situation surrounding Justin Trudeau's election. The Liberal Party has fielded more governments and prime ministers than any other party in Canada's history, earning the nickname the Natural Governing Party. In response to this, throughout the 90s and early 2000s, most of Canada's right-wing parties would merge to become the modern Conservative Party, otherwise known as the Tories. From then on, 5 parties would have some level of political capital on the national stage. The Liberal Party and Conservative Party would represent your general center-left and center-right positions, similar to your average Democratic and Republican politician in the US. The New Democratic Party, otherwise known as the NDP, are the hard-left European-style socialist party of Bernie Sanders' dreams. The Bloc, a party with policies that vary between both left and right, but primarily concerns itself with Quebec sovereignty. And the Green Party, which sits somewhere between the Liberals and the NDP but focuses on the environment, and has never held any seats in the Canadian Senate, or more than 2 seats in the House of Commons. Throughout this period, the Liberal Party had been racked by multiple corruption scandals, and during the 2006 federal election, Stephen Harper led the Conservatives to victory. However, because the Conservatives only held 124 seats in the House out of a total of 308, Harper led a minority government in the 39th Parliament. Extreme roadblocking from the Bloc, as well as multiple attempted votes of no confidence, led to another election 2 years later, where Harper's Conservatives won roughly the same number of seats in the 40th Parliament. During the 40th Parliament, Harper would prorogue Parliament twice in order to break the will of his political opponents, sparking protests. This, along with Harper's cabinet being found in contempt of Parliament, an event that had never before happened in any Commonwealth country, led to all of the other parties opposing the government's budget. Without a budget, another election was called. The election of the 41st Parliament saw Stephen Harper take a majority, despite the Tory scandals of the 40th. This is due to several reasons. One, even though the NDP had never formed a government or held official opposition status, the NDP's leader, Jack Layton, had become extremely popular throughout Canada personally, especially among the Trekkie population. It was no secret that Layton's health had been deteriorating due to prostate cancer throughout the election, and despite this, he continued to campaign. At the same time, the Liberal leader, Michael Ignatieff, well, just look at this man. I promise you, you'll never see a more bland, milquetoast history teacher looking guy in your life. Oh, he actually was a history teacher. Ignatieff's exceptionally poor performance at the debates, in contrast with Layton's.
Why do you have the worst attendance record in the House of Commons of any member of Parliament? If you want to be Prime Minister, you better learn how to be a member of Parliament first. You know, most Canadians, if they don't show up for work, they don't get a promotion.
As well as the lingering memory of Liberal corruption, led to the Liberals taking only 34 seats and becoming the third party for the first time in history. Filling that vacuum was the NDP, on the back of the charisma and love surrounding Jack Layton, and the Tories. In essence, Stephen Harper didn't necessarily win a majority government for himself. He won it because the Liberals were exceptionally incompetent and a small-time third party ended up usurping them. As a majority government, Harper had a guaranteed 4 years of prime ministership with no possibility of an early election being called. In this time, he destroyed the unions that protected workers for crown corporations, intensified Canada's own war on drugs, negotiated Canada's role in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, massively expanded the government and law enforcement powers to collect data and spy on Canadian citizens, and removed environmental protections. A lot of those things Obama did in the USA, at around the same time. It's almost like there's no real difference between the institutional left and the institutional right, you guys. By the time Harper's 4 years were up, Canadians were absolutely fed up with the man. He started off popular, but when his hands weren't bound in a majority parliament, he made some extremely unpopular decisions, and left the office as one of the least popular prime ministers of all time. In the NDP, Jack Layton's replacement after his death was a slimy, goony beard man whose speech and actions both caused him to be considered untrustworthy. And after Ignatieff's massive failure in the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau rose to power as the party leader. And to his credit, Trudeau did spend a lot of political capital wiping clean the old corruption scandals through party purges. As for Ignatieff, one of the biggest lines of attack against him during the election was that he had spent more of his adult life living overseas than actually in Canada, and that when he inevitably lost, he'd be hightailing it right on out again. And what did he do? Oh, he went to teach at Harvard. And then Budapest. You know, I doubt you'll ever get back into politics, Mike. But if you do, maybe don't make political speeches to an electorate like you'd reprimand a kid for not handing in his homework on time. So, let's quickly recap. Justin Trudeau hit the election for the 42nd Parliament with a lot of things going for him. Youth, rhetoric that younger Canadians reverberated with, popular left-wing political positions. In essence, a redo of Trudeau mania. He also led a rejuvenated, reformed Liberal Party against a universally despised Tory Prime Minister and an NDP opposition leader who took a powerful legacy and basically destroyed it, trying to create the same cult of personality around himself that organically grew around his predecessor. Therefore, it was no surprise to anybody that Trudeau won a majority. But as it turns out, candidate Trudeau is not the same person as Prime Minister Trudeau. The website trudeaumeter.ca tracks all of Trudeau's campaign promises, lists which ones he's accomplished, which ones he's still working on, which he's not yet done any work on, and which he's actively broken. Looking over the list of broken promises, it's no surprise that most of them are economic policies. For all of the genuinely evil shit Harper did to Canada during his tenure, his educational background is in economics, and he led Canada through the 2008 Great Recession mostly unscathed. Meanwhile, Trudeau's educational background is in literature and education, with both an engineering degree and an environmental geography degree having gone uncompleted before he decided to get into politics. His lack of economic experience, combined with a far-left view on how the economy should function, is probably what led him to promise everything under the sun while still somehow maintaining a balanced budget. And when questioned on this, Trudeau just didn't know what to say. I'll put in a full exchange here at a town hall at Western University, just to show you what I mean.
Hello, Justin.
Hello.
My name is Zach. I am 21 years old, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the silent majority in this country. When you were running for the office of Prime Minister, your party said that Canada would run modest $10 billion deficits until the end of your term. Then the budget would become balanced. 1 year later, that is clearly no longer the case. In the most recent update of long-term economic and fiscal projections released by the Department of Finance, it is predicted that under your government, we will run deficits every year until 2055, and we will have an enormous $1.5 trillion in debt. $1.5 trillion. That is totally unacceptable. To give some people some perspective, in the final year of our previous government, that very same fiscal report projected we would have a $160 billion surplus by the year 2040. Justin, what are you doing to this country? You are intentionally setting up millions of young Canadians like myself for complete and utter failure. And what? And for what? To pander to your own moral superiority complex? If you care about young Canadians and the future of this country, you need to stop what you are doing right now.
No, please, please. Hey, everyone. This is an open town hall, if you needed proof. And we'll let Zach finish his question, please.
My question is this. What, if anything, are you going to do to curb your insane and reckless spending habits, which are on the verge of being criminal, to make sure that we do not end up being $1.5 trillion in debt, as your government predicts?
Okay. Thank you. Now, in the last election, three parties were in significant contention for earning the trust to govern this country. Two of them made the decision that they were going to balance the books at all costs. One party, my party, took the decision, recognized that what this country needed was investment in our infrastructure, in the middle class. We needed to help people get ahead because, quite frankly, under the previous government, we'd had the worst record on growth since R.B. Bennett in the depths of the Great Depression. We needed to face down the challenge that we're seeing all around the world right now of a middle class that doesn't feel like success is within their grasp anymore. It doesn't feel that the story of progress that has written the story of this country from one generation to the next is actually working for them, because people aren't of the opinion that their kids are automatically, even however hard they work, going to be able to have a better quality of life or more opportunities than they did. There are real anxieties and doubts out there. And we're seeing that not just in Canada, but around the world, where people are fearful and they're leaning towards closing in, closing off, pointing fingers, laying blame. And we took a chance in the last election. We said, you know what? We think Canadians are better than that. And we're not going to play the politics of fear and division. And we're going to be upfront with Canadians that what we think we need is investment. We need to invest in public transit. We need to invest in social infrastructure. We need to invest in green infrastructure. We need to invest in our universities and colleges and research institutions. We need to invest in our young people. We need to invest in the middle class and those working hard to join. And the first thing we did was we lowered taxes on the middle class and raised them on the wealthiest 1%. And I'm making a jump here, Zach, but I assume that the people you voted for, the Conservatives, voted against that particular measure to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lower them on the middle class. And then, this past summer, we brought in the Canada Child Benefit, which helps 9 out of 10 families in this country with more money, tax-free, every month for the costs of groceries, school supplies, raising their kids. And the reason we can do that is we're giving more money to the people who need it, those in the middle class and those working hard to join it, by doing less for the wealthy families that received the child benefit under the previous government. These are decisions we made because we know that giving opportunities to everyone to succeed, that supporting the middle class and those working hard to join it is the way we build the future. So when I talk to Canadians about being optimistic about our future, about investing in the kinds of things that we know are going to lead to good jobs for our kids and secure retirements for ourselves and our parents, that are going to lead to better investments in research and innovation, that are going to lead to solutions, better health care, better outcomes in education. These are the kinds of things that we talked about in the last election. And we, in the Liberal Party and the Government of Canada, have been consistent that our focus is in investing in ways to grow the middle class and help Canadians move forward, and I stand by that.
Did you notice how much of a non-answer that was? Did you notice how hard Trudeau actually avoided answering the question? I mean, if we had to glean some kind of response from that spiel, it's, yes, I'm going to run up a massive deficit, but I'm going to use that money to reinvest in Canada. Which sounds good until you realize that almost all of Justin's reinvestments have been completely neutered, and that the bills for them won't be coming in until long after Justin's left office. It's no surprise he doesn't have an answer. It's because he doesn't have to worry about the solution. Trudeau's support for environmentally friendly policies seem to have also been lip service as well. Despite promises to the contrary, fossil fuel subsidies remain in place for the next 8 years. Alberta's oil sands continue to be exploited in a way that harms the environment, pipelines continue to be built in ways that disregard the owners and occupants of the land the pipeline sits on.
Our government has been consistent from the very beginning that Canadians need economic development while at the same time protecting the environment and the well-being of future generations. We need to make sure that the processes are folding in community perspectives, partnerships with Indigenous peoples, the top-notch science and response concerns that people have. There isn't a country in the world that would find billions of barrels of oil and leave it in the ground while there is a market for it.
And with these words, the Trudeau government approved the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain project that runs from Alberta to Burnaby, British Columbia, a project that has sparked protests across the country. The government is also giving a green light to another project, the Line 3 pipeline expansion from Alberta to Wisconsin. Environmentalists wanted red lights on all projects.
It's not a question of if there will be a spill, it's a question of when there will be a spill.
Oh, and speaking of that, Justin, back before you got into politics, didn't you object to a zinc mine in the Northwest Territories that would have poisoned the Nahanni River, a World Heritage Site due to both its ecological importance and the native people who lived there for thousands of years? Do you still hold those views, considering you've broken your promise about the Site C Dam project, which would submerge native lands upon its completion? Oh, I guess it's okay, because you've also refused to ratify the UN's Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, even though that was another promise, with members of your cabinet going so far as to say it was unworkable as law. We can keep going if you like. There's broken promises here about military spending, about veterans affairs, about gun control, but let's get to the one that I think is the most important broken promise on this list: Trudeau's abandonment of electoral reform. Canada currently uses a first-past-the-post electoral system. Whoever has the most votes wins the election. Simple, right? But first-past-the-post voting generally trends towards party consolidation, and mega-parties become the norm. This happens because parties tend to not want to split the vote. For example, like in Canada during the 39th and 40th Parliaments, when you have one right-leaning party and two left-leaning parties, often the left-leaning voters will vote for either one or the other, splitting the vote between the two options. Tory politicians ended up walking away with seats even though their constituents largely disagreed with them, because the votes for either the Liberal or the NDP candidate weren't higher than the Conservative candidate, even though the total number of votes for both of them was much higher. In first-past-the-post voting systems, larger parties tend to cannibalize smaller parties in an effort not to split votes. The US is the most extreme example of this, with politics dominated by two massive parties, while people desiring nuanced political positions are generally left out in the cold. Trudeau acknowledged that first-past-the-post voting helped destroy the Liberals in the past, and made it a core promise of his campaign to change Canada's electoral system.
So I'm proposing we make every vote count. We are committed to ensuring that the 2015 election will be the last federal election using first-past-the-post.
Even when first-past-the-post voting brought him into power, he reiterated that promise multiple times. And there are other voting systems that would work just fine in a political environment that has a plurality of different parties, like Canada's. But on February 1st, 2017, Trudeau walked back on this promise.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has abandoned his commitment. He has betrayed Canadians. A political party promises something in order to get elected and to appear progressive, but then once elected, they shamelessly break that promise. I would call that a massive political deception. What does the Prime Minister call it?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past year, we consulted with hundreds of thousands of Canadians to hear their views on transforming our electoral system. It's very clear, as people in this House know, I have long preferred a preferential ballot. The members opposite wanted a proportional representation. The official opposition wanted a referendum. There is no consensus. There is no clear path forward. It would be irresponsible for us to do something that harms Canada's stability when, in fact, what we need is moving forward on growth for the middle class and support.
Honourable Member for Outremer.
Prime Minister obviously never read the report, Mr. Speaker. The My Democracy charade didn't even ask Canadians if they wanted to change the voting system. But you know what? At almost every single one of the Prime Minister's town halls, someone asked him about democratic reform. So as the Prime Minister now fabricates evidence to claim Canadians didn't want what he got elected on, my question is, what expression from Canadians would have been sufficient to get the Prime Minister to respect his own promise. The Prime Minister made this promise hundreds of times during the election. He wrote it in his party's platform. He put it in his very first throne speech. You know what? They promised it 1,813 times since they got elected. That's the real number, Mr. Speaker. How can Canadians trust anything this Prime Minister has to say after he has so blatantly and intentionally betrayed his own word?
Prime Minister.
Contrary, Mr. Speaker, we spent a year listening to Canadians, talking with them, hearing from a broad range of views, seeing the firmly held views that a number of people feel on that, and understanding that there is no clear path forward, there is no consensus. A referendum would be a bad idea. Moving forward in a divisive policy would be a bad idea. The fact of the matter is, I am not going to do something that is wrong for Canadians just to tick off a box on an electoral platform. That's not the kind of the Prime Minister I will be.
In a letter Trudeau wrote to Karina Gould, the Minister of Democratic Institutions, he stated, "A clear preference for a new electoral system, let alone a consensus, has not emerged." Furthermore, without a clear preference or a clear question, a referendum would not be in Canada's interest. Changing the electoral system will not be in your mandate. Justin, changing the electoral system is in your mandate. It's what you ran on. It's why a lot of people voted for you. And it's what a lot of people expect you to do. In my opinion, this is one of the bigger issues, domestically, Canada needs to solve. A lot of other things stem from this. The economy, the refugee crisis, Canada's role overseas, healthcare, the environment, you name it. We're going to have a much harder time actually solving these issues rather than simply bending to corporate interests or international interests, as long as a voting method that serves to polarize the political system exists. Props to the NDP's Nathan Cullen, though, who went on TV to outright call Trudeau a liar and a coward.
Let me start by saying I was a bit surprised that it wasn't Mr. Trudeau out here, somehow lacking the courage and fortitude to make this announcement himself. He certainly had no problems making the promise, but not yet the courage to break that promise in front of you all here today. That rather than keep his word to the millions of Canadians who voted for him and the hundreds of thousands of Canadians who engaged in good faith with Mr. Trudeau over this question of how to strengthen and broaden our democracy, Mr. Trudeau chose today instead to spit in their face. I want to choose my words very carefully. I know words matter. The words that we speak here and in Parliament matter. What Mr. Trudeau approved himself today was to be a liar, was to be of the most cynical variety of politician, saying whatever it takes to get elected, then once elected, seeking any excuse, however weak, however absent, to justify that lie to Canadians. He promised to be different. He promised not to conduct himself this way, but to conduct himself with honor and integrity. I'm not sure the Liberals understand what the word respect means, because to have made such a black and white promise and then to feel so casual and cynical in breaking that promise, it puts into question any commitment, any promise Mr. Trudeau makes or has made in the past. The Liberals and Mr. Trudeau today made themselves the best argument of why we desperately need electoral reform.
However, not everything Trudeau said and done has been tracked by Trudeau Meter. One of the most important ones to me personally, Trudeau's stance in the TPP, he basically pulled a Hillary Clinton on. Like Hillary, during the election he recognized that the TPP wasn't popular with the electorate, so, like Hillary, he took a wait-and-see approach with the TPP, stating that he didn't really know if he supported it or not.
We're always going to need to be engaged in international trade. It's what has helped Canada become the successful country that we are right now. We need to continue to do it, and it's important that we get it right, which is why I'm going to take a very careful look at the provisions and listen to Canadians from across the country and have them get an opportunity to express their concerns in committees and before Parliament as we seek ratification of this deal.
Is that a yes?
That is, I look forward to seeing the details of the deal, but we go into it from a position of being resolutely and consistently, I might add, pro-trade.
Again, with the TPP, you've said that you want to look at the details of the deal before you make a call on it, but there are some details that are out this morning, and I'm guessing you've had a look at them. Is there anything that you've seen so far that gives you pause, particularly with regard to the auto parts and dairy sectors?
Obviously, there have been a lot of questions about that, and I look forward to hearing from representatives of those industries, from concerned Canadians, from labour, from manufacturers, about the impacts and the challenges of this particular deal, which is why I am committed to a full and open discussion in the House of Commons, a debate on this, and if I become Prime Minister and earn your trust on October 19th, we will ratify this properly in the House of Commons after a fulsome and responsible discussion.
And 12 days after the Canadian election, in a call to the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Trudeau reiterated his government's support for the TPP, just like Hillary would have done had she been elected. This is how we know for a fact that Justin Trudeau is a miracle worker. He was able to get all of those opinions from average Canadians, as well as have a rigorous debate about the topic in the House of Commons, all in just 12 days. Did you see that it was good and rest on the 13th day too, Justin? And then there's Motion 103. M103 gained international attention, something that Canadian politics rarely does, because in an era of migrants flowing into Europe unchecked, of Donald Trump's Great Wall of America, of ISIS and Islamic attacks in France and Germany and Sweden, Canada decided to ratify a motion condemning Islamophobia, presumably in response to the Quebec mosque shooting. Even though the motion was first tabled before that attack, support for it only began to surge in the House afterward. There's been a few misconceptions about M103. It's not a bill or a law. It hasn't become illegal to be Islamophobic in Canada or anything. Rather, it is a motion, which is basically a suggestion that the government look into a particular topic, do some research, and get back to Parliament with their results somewhere down the road. Let's read M103 in its entirety. It's not very long. That, in the opinion of the House, the government should A. Recognize the need to quell the increasing public climate of hate and fear. B. Condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination, and take note of the House of Commons Petition E411 and the issues raised by it. And C. Request that the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage undertake a study on how the government could 1. Develop a whole-of-government approach to reducing or eliminating systemic racism and religious discrimination, including Islamophobia, in Canada, while ensuring a community-centered focus with a holistic response through evidence-based policymaking, and 2. Collect data to contextualize hate crime reports and to conduct needs assessments for impacted communities, and that the committee should present its findings and recommendations to the House of Commons no later than 240 calendar days from the adoption of this motion, provided that in its report, the committee should make recommendations that the government may use to better reflect the enshrined rights and freedoms in the Constitution Acts, including the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This basically says, we think that Canadian culture and Canadian citizens have an Islamophobia problem, and we need to stop it. Let's look into how. It doesn't define Islamophobia for the purposes of the motion, casting an incredibly wide net. Criticism of Islam as a religion can be considered Islamophobic. Criticism of Sharia law as a political framework can also be considered Islamophobic. Let me repeat, some definitions of Islamophobia consider the statement, I am not a Muslim and I don't want Sharia law to be the law of the land, to be Islamophobic. And this motion may also consider that statement to be hateful. This motion also singles Islam out for special consideration, though it does give lip service to other forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination. Urqa Khalid, the motion's author, was unwilling to entertain any compromise on the specific wording of the motion. A counter-motion, tabled by the Tories, did not specifically mention Islamophobia, instead condemning all forms of systemic racism, religious intolerance, and discrimination of Muslims, Jews, Christians, Sikhs, Hindus, and other religious communities. This motion was defeated, with the Conservatives, the Bloc, the NDP, and the Greens all voting for it, and the Liberals near unanimously voting against it. These facts, combined with the House of Commons' history of passing similar motions for Jews and Yazidis in 2016 and Coptic Christians in 2011, makes me think that M103 is liberal grandstanding. Khalid's efforts may come from a genuine concern for Canada's Muslim community. She is a Muslim herself, though clearly a liberal one. But she's also a politician riding a liberal wave. M103 is a way of building up her own brand within the Liberal Party, and a way for the Liberal Party to champion a new rising star with a proper demographic appeal. If this wasn't simply Khalid grandstanding with Liberal backing, the Tory motion that did almost exactly the same thing wouldn't have been universally opposed. My concern, however, is with what happens in 240 days, after whatever committee returns to Parliament with its findings on M103. M103 does not restrict free speech, but the steps beyond that might. It may not currently be considered hateful to be a critic of Islam's treatment of women, its politically expansionist rhetoric, or its penchant for terror attacks, but it might be in the future. And that's what scares me. M103's findings may lead to a future where it is considered, for example, a hate crime to object to female genital mutilation, as it's considered a cultural practice by Muslims. But what does Trudeau himself think about all of this? Well, during International Women's Day 2017, the House of Commons held a mock session of Parliament comprising entirely of young female students, which Trudeau was present for. During this event, he answered a question regarding Islamophobia. Let's listen in.
On Islamophobia, we have been seeing over the past while a rise in expressions of hate and in hate crimes across the country. Yesterday, we had an attack on a mosque in Calgary, but we also had attacks on the Jewish community in the GTA. We have examples of racism, intolerance, and hatred spiking up all across the country over the past months. Obviously, the terrible terrorist attack in Quebec City was an example of it, was a particularly brutal example of it, but we have an awful lot more to do. It may reassure you to know that last fall, this House unanimously, every member in this House, approved of a motion condemning Islamophobia. It was unanimously approved. That was a good measure. It was a moment where everyone came together and agreed. It was a motion by Mr. Mulcair, and we were glad to have this House condemn Islamophobia. More recently, when a motion came forward to not just condemn Islamophobia, but to ask the House of Commons committee to study it, to get into the issues around it and to see what we can do in a very open way about moving forward on something that is unfortunately increasing in terms of intolerance, it has created a bit of a debate. And on one hand, I'd like to think that everyone can all get up and always condemn things that are bad and move on. But on the other hand, sometimes it's useful for people to stand up and disagree, to point out to the rest of us that there's still a lot of work to do. If everyone had just agreed and we'd moved on, maybe we wouldn't be addressing the very scary and real spike in hate speech. Maybe we wouldn't be challenging each other as politicians in the things that we're saying, in the choices we make as leaders to play up divisions and fears. It's easy to try and scare people into voting for you. It's easy to try and say something that's going to pit a neighbor against a neighbor. And if you do it in a sneaky way and use coded language, maybe you won't get called on it by the majority. Maybe you'll get to slip it through. Well, if M103, condemning Islamophobia, actually gets people to notice that there are people uncomfortable with that idea, that there are people who still have problems with the idea that we would condemn discrimination against Muslims, then we have to know. We have to expose that, and we have to deal with it as a society. Because if this room isn't a reflection of what's happening in our streets, in our towns, in our communities, then we're not dealing with the real things that Canadians expect us to deal with. So, do we have a problem with Islamophobia in this country? Yes, we do. Do we have a problem with anti-Semitism in this country? Yes, we do. Do we have a problem in this country with discrimination and hatred? Yes, we do. And we need to talk about this. And we need to challenge each other to be better on this. We need to recognize that we still have a problem because there are men out there who will not say, yes, I am a feminist. We need to recognize that saying and bringing forward truths that are uncomfortable to some, and challenge each other to shift our ways of thinking out of the easy ways we do, to lay open wounds to sunshine and disinfectant. That is also the role that we have in this House and that we have as active, engaged citizens in this country. We need to speak up. The silent majority of good people in Canada who are not intolerant, who are not bigoted, need to know they can be less silent. We need to speak up for the things we believe in. This House and every House across this country needs to be a reflection of that.
There are obvious problems here. First, Trudeau makes the classic SJW mistake in conflating hate crimes with hate speech or hateful thoughts or expressions of hate. And no, they're not the same thing. Words can never be violence. Calling a black man a nigger is not violence. It might make you a racist asshole. It might make you somebody that I would never ever want to associate with, do business with, or whatever. But it is not violent. It's not the same as attacking a black man. Not using a trans person's preferred pronouns is not a violent act. Not liking Islam as a religion or a political philosophy is not a violent act. You can't lump in all the hateful comments, all the racial slurs and whatever, with the number of actual attacks and claim, oh, Canada's so violent towards Muslims. That's not how it works. Secondly, Trudeau is right in labeling the Quebec mosque shooting a terrorist attack. It didn't use explosives or airplanes, but it was a mass murder designed not only to kill, but to inspire terror within the affected communities. And preventing these attacks, responding to these attacks, helping victims of these attacks, and seeing the perpetrators of these attacks brought to justice is absolutely the government's job. It is not the government's job to police the population for thought crime. In conflating rhetoric with violence, Trudeau has taken on a task that will never, ever be completed. The government cannot wipe out racist ideas or attitudes or even speech within the population. It can massively curtail human rights in order to get rid of some of it, sure. But how far do you go before you consider the job done? If your criteria, Justin, is to wipe out not only hateful actions, not only hateful speech, but hateful attitudes and ideas, the job will never ever be done, even if there's not a shred of evidence that any hate exists. This is the path to totalitarianism. And it's a far cry from what Trudeau used to say about Stephen Harper's conduct as Prime Minister back in the day, too.
And I also think it's time that Liberals took back liberty. These conservatives pretend to talk a good game about freedom, but look at what they've done with it. They've fallen a long way from the era of Sir John A. Macdonald to the "why do you hate freedom" taunts of the recently departed Sun News Network. Their instincts are now to be suspicious of people who do not share their beliefs, to harden divisions with people whose views differ from their own. In my 7 years in Parliament, I have heard the Conservative Prime Minister accuse two different leaders of the NDP of sympathizing with terrorists. The Conservative Party of Canada accused notable McGillian Irwin Cotler of anti-Semitism, and the former Public Safety Minister to declare, "You're either with us or you're with the child pornographers." Yeah, for that particular effort, the Prime Minister eventually rewarded him with a judicial appointment. This, my friends, is not your parents' Conservative Party. Their approach to politics might work in the short term, but it is corrosive over time, especially in a diverse country like Canada. It stokes anxiety and foments fear. Instead of encouraging Canadians to fight for one another's liberty, it tells us to be suspicious of each other's choices. Mr. Harper and I disagree fundamentally about a great many things, but none perhaps more so than this. Leading this country should mean you bring Canadians together. You do not divide them against one another. Fear is a dangerous thing. Once it is sanctioned by the state, there is no telling where it might lead. It is always a short path to walk from being suspicious of our fellow citizens to taking actions to restrict their liberty.
It's like I said at the beginning. Candidate Trudeau is not the same man as Prime Minister Trudeau. Candidate Trudeau said,
"Fear is a dangerous thing. Once it is sanctioned by the state, there is no telling where it might lead. It is always a short path to walk from being suspicious of our fellow citizens to taking actions to restrict their liberty."
while Prime Minister Trudeau said,
M103, condemning Islamophobia, actually gets people to notice that there are people uncomfortable with that idea, that there are people who still have problems with the idea that we would condemn discrimination against Muslims, then we have to know. We have to expose that, and we have to deal with it as a society.
Thirdly, this position of Trudeau's really makes his fervent claim of being a feminist ring hollow, doesn't it? I mean, Trudeau has no problem with shoehorning that shit in whenever he can. Bringing up Gamergate like Zoe Quinn was an absolute angel.
My mom raised me to be a feminist. My father raised me, he was of a different generation, but he raised me to respect and defend everyone's rights. I have deeply grounded my own identity in that, and I'm proud to say I'm a feminist. And the things that we see online, whether it's issues like Gamergate and video games and misogyny in popular culture, is something that we need people to stand clearly against.
Or while at a visit to the UN as well.
First of all, I'm going to keep saying loud and clearly that I am a feminist until...
Hear me roar.
Until it is met with a shrug.
Or how about the World Economic Forum? Surely there's nothing else worth talking about there other than feminism, right?
And by the way, we shouldn't be afraid of the word feminist. Men and women should use it to describe themselves anytime they want.
But Trudeau's been caught out multiple times for placing Muslims on a higher tier than women on the progressive stack. For example, before he became Prime Minister, the Tory government decided to put forward a motion condemning female genital mutilation, honor killings, and forced marriage as barbaric. And Justin Trudeau objected on the grounds that using the word barbaric to describe other cultures was racist. He later apologized, presumably because at this point he had little political power, but I don't think his opinions actually changed too much. Why? Because Trudeau, as Prime Minister, has had no problem attending events at Canadian mosques where the non-Muslim women who were with him were forced to wear headscarves, enter and leave through side doors, and sit on isolated balconies or off to the side away from men.
We are a place that has figured out that diversity can be a source of strength, not just a source of weakness. And as I look at this beautiful room with the sisters upstairs.
When you're a social justice warrior or a regressive leftist, a minority religion practiced primarily by racially minority individuals on the one hand, and feminism and women's rights on the other hand, which one do you ultimately choose? Well, look at the face of Ontario's Liberal Premier Kathleen Wynne, and you get your answer. And although I don't really like the Canadian-based right-leaning news outlet The Rebel, they were still the only ones actually willing to hold Trudeau's feet to the fire on this issue.
Prime Minister, it's about the event you attended yesterday in the morning, and some progressive, what I guess I would call progressive feminists, who very much support your work for gender equality and very admiring of that work, were disappointed that you attended a gender-segregated event. And so I guess my question would be, how do you reconcile your brand as a self-styled feminist Prime Minister with attendance at a gender-segregated event?
Look at the balls on this guy. Or any left-leaning news organization is going to stand up here. Any feminist academics or writers. Any at all. Is it going to yet again be the job of the Conservatives to make a principled stand for women's rights, gay rights, human rights against Islam, just like in the US, the UK, France, and elsewhere? Are there any liberal politicians left in the fucking world willing to look beyond somebody's race or religion or gender and say, your human rights abuses are unacceptable, and your culture, your religion, and your ideology don't excuse that fact?
The fact is, the values that define Canada include respect and openness towards our full diversity. Indeed, understanding that diversity is a source of strength, not a source of weakness, is why I think that politicians need to be focused on bringing people together rather than fomenting divisions. And that's why I am happy to attend community events in churches, temples, synagogues, mosques. I'm happy to engage with Canadians where they are and talk about the full range of opportunities that we're working hard to create. Opportunities for growth for the middle class, through investment, through putting more money in the pockets of hardworking families, through lowering...
Yeah, Justin, you're not on the campaign trail anymore. Robotically regurgitating talking points like Marco Rubio's assertion that Barack Obama knows exactly what he's doing does not answer the fucking question. I'm somebody who has never voted Conservative in my life. And I grew up with the general idea, as did many others my age, that the Liberals and the NDP generally had the backs of average Canadians on social issues, even if they were hit and miss economically. This was something I actually discussed with Scrump Monkey, or El Scrumpo on Twitter, on a call recently, and that discussion helped me form a hypothesis regarding liberal abandonment of the left, in both Canada and elsewhere. When I first became politically knowledgeable on even the most basic level, I was about 8 years old. Yes, I am the predecessor to the woke 8-year-old. Though not really. At that time, I knew who the Prime Minister of Canada was, Jean Chrétien. I knew that he led the Liberal Party, and I knew that the Conservative Party was in opposition to him. I knew that he had a stroke that caused one side of his face to droop, and I knew that he made light of it by saying that he didn't talk out of both sides of his mouth. And as I grew older, my knowledge of politics also naturally grew. In high school, I remember holding the opinion that gay marriage should be legal. And I remember being considered a radical at that time for that position. I remember the fervor when gay marriage did actually become legal in 2003. And in that call with Scrump, we sat down and did a very brief look over at the major notable achievements of prime ministers of my time. Mulroney, Conservative, privatization of several crown corporations, NAFTA, support in the First Gulf War. Campbell, Conservative, first female prime minister. Mulroney bailed out of the party when he became unpopular, dumping all the problems on her. She only held the office for 3 months. Chrétien, Liberal. Quebec referendum, Kyoto Protocol, invasion of Afghanistan, opposition to the Second Iraq War. Martin, Liberal. Civil Marriage Act, rejection of American Missile Treaty, joining the G20, Liberal corruption scandals. Harper, Conservative. Hollowing out of Canada's softwood lumber industry, apologies for residential schools, 2008 Great Recession, multiple uses of prorogation, parliamentary contempt, withdrawal from Kyoto, crackdown on unions, human rights, and freedom of expression. Trudeau, Liberal. His father's good name. Though both Liberal and Tory prime ministers have had both good and bad accomplishments, at a cursory glance, it seems like the Liberals have done more good and the Tories have done more bad. The Liberals have acted more in accordance with civil liberties and the Tories have acted more in accordance with corporate interests. But America's third-way corporatist democratic policies have come to Canada, full swing, with Justin Trudeau. And for a lot of young Liberals, hell, for a lot of middle-aged Liberals who are looking for a left-leaning party willing to take a stand against human rights abuses, even if those abuses come from racial or religious minorities, they are no longer seeing any champions within the Liberal Party. Instead, Trudeau is content to call you a racist, a sexist, and an Islamophobe, all the while pursuing economic policies ranging between dysfunctional to corporatists, with no room for the Canadian citizen in between. This is the reason why Liberals are abandoning left-leaning parties in the UK. This is the reason why Liberals abandon Hillary in the US. And, in my opinion, if an election were called today, this is the reason why Trudeau's Liberal Party would find itself in serious trouble. And it's also why the radical left protest group, Antifa, spray paints "Liberals get the bullet too." It's not racism, it's not sexism, it's not Islamophobia, it's not homophobia. It's because curtailing personal freedom and liberty is explicitly what liberalism fights against, even when Canada's quote-unquote Liberal Party wants to do it. As for Trudeau himself, I think the pressure of his father's legacy, plus finally managing to grasp real power, has fundamentally changed the man into somebody his younger self would have found bitter disappointment in.
Later, with a trademark family shrug, the young Trudeau said he doesn't much care what his peers think of his views.
Everyone's got peer pressure at this age. I mean, there's pressure to smoke, there's pressure to do all sorts of stuff. And I've never been affected by peer pressure. Never.
I know he was only 18 here, but this Trudeau is somebody willing to say something unpopular because he thought it was right. He was fighting against a Quebec independence referendum, a very popular independence referendum, while living in Montreal. Maybe this is an instance where he didn't completely get wiser as he got older. Trudeau also once said that he found the large numbers of people turning to him for potential party leadership solely because of his family name to be unsettling. What happened to that Trudeau? Where did he go? He once completely rejected identity politics.
I'll make the case that Canadian liberty has got one of the world's most vexatious problems right: the interplay between individual freedom and collective identity. We understand that people are defined both by the things that unite us and distinguish us from one another: languages, cultures, faiths, even, importantly, gender and sexual orientation. However, we also know that all of these contribute to a person's identity, but don't define it. These things all find their highest, most concrete expression in the individual human beings who embody them.
What happened to that Trudeau? What happened to the Trudeau that would have been horrified at praising Fidel Castro upon the dictator's death? What happened to the Trudeau that said this?
Our politics are supposed to be retail these days. We're expected to talk about very specific measures targeted at key audiences and swing voters, especially in an election year. But I have an old-fashioned view. I think policies are concrete expressions of values. Priorities are important. Specific commitments are important. But there is no way to predict the events you will have to navigate during your time in office, let alone the measures that will be required to manage those events. People aren't naive, they know that. So Canadians ought to know what core values motivate their leaders' decisions, whatever events may throw at them.
If policies are expressions of values, Justin, what values can we say that you hold? Ah well, at least he kept his promise to legalize weed, you guys. 2018, here we come. Hope you enjoyed the video, pals. This one underwent several rewrites and took a very long time to research and put together. If you think my content is worth supporting financially, hit at patreon.com/shortfightotaku. If you want to chat it up with me, check out the social media links on screen. I also stream regularly at twitch.tv/shortfightotaku. You can come hang out with me tonight, in fact, if you want. And remember, if you kill your enemies, they win.